Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Annisa. I'm from English Literature 5B. My ID number 403190038. Okay, I will take this video for final test English prose. The title is An Analysis Report of the Novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and literary approach that I choose is structuralism approach. Pride and Prejudice is a novel by Jane Austen published on 28 January 1813. This novel tells about the romance of an upper middle class English family in the late 19th century. This novel contains a depiction of events surrounding the life and the main character, Elizabeth Bennet, who lives in Longbourn, England. Elizabeth is described as a cheerful, polite, and sharp-witted girl and reported to be intimidated by anyone, and the Bennets have unmarried daughters. This meant Mrs. Bennet is worried because if Mr. Bennet died, so his children would not inherit. Then Mrs. Bennet has ambition to marry off his children to rich men. Incidentally, at the time, a rich young man had just moved to Netherfield, an area near the Bennet family's residence. Not long ago, the Bennets had the opportunity to meet their new neighbor, Mr. Bingley, at the dance with Meryton. Mr. Handsome Bingley apparently brought his friend. The name is Fitzwilliam Darcy. Mr. Bingley is described as a pleasant, friendly, and courteous gentleman, while Mr. Darcy is direct and introvert as well. In the dance early, Jane, who is the eldest daughter of the Bennet family, became close to Mr. Bingley. At the time, Elizabeth overheard Mr. Darcy insult himself, so began Elizabeth's hatred and all her prejudice against Mr. Darcy. This then led Elizabeth to get involved at future, using Mr. Darcy in the future. I will describe element literature from the novel Pride and Prejudice. Number 1 is setting. Pride and Prejudice is set in England at the same point in the very late 1700s, early 1800. The exact dates are unclear, but the action takes place sometime during the Napoleonic Wars, 1797 until 1815, because Austen referenced soldiers and regiments. Since the novel was written and revised between 1796 and 1813, we can assume Austen sets the novel at about the same time she was writing. The action moves between a few different locations in England, including Brighton, London, and the counties of the Hertfordshire, Derbyshire, and Kent, but there is little detailed description of the geographic settings. And point of view, Pride and Prejudice is narrated by an omniscient third-person narrator. The narrator has access to the characters' thoughts and feelings and explains them to the readers. And next is tone. The tone of Pride and Prejudice is often critical and even biting, while Pride and Prejudice is popularly considered a love story. The narrator's attitude toward various characters and even is often sarcastic. There are three main areas where the critical tone of the novel is made very clear. The first is the representation of foolish character, the attitude toward presentation about the social class, and the third is and the critiques of gender roles. Many of the characters in the novel are ignorant or foolish in some way. The next is mood. The mood of Pride and Prejudice combines cynicism with romance and allows readers to feel the gender-motivated tension of the era. The theme is there are three major themes of Pride and Prejudice are love or marriage, pride, and reputation or class. Pride is an obvious theme because Pride and Prejudice is plot and character based, which leads perfectly to the high horse pride of Mr. Darcy and the independent pride of Elizabeth. Pride inevitably keeps them from love. And the second is love or marriage is also a huge theme in the Pride and Prejudice because that was a main goal in the lives of women in the 19th century. to marry for sustainment, not for love, which is a theme argued. And next is rising action. All action that lead to the climax, such as Elizabeth's first disavowal of Darcy's, her emotion change, and Lydia's action are counted as ascending action. All acts that lead to the marriage of Elizabeth and Darcy are counted as falling action. And then is climax. There's a final proposal to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth essentially tells him that she would not marry him if he was the last man on earth. But that's not the end of the climax. Darcy gives Elizabeth a letter that exonerates him for all the charge she leveled against him. Both of our heroes start to question themselves. Can Elizabeth really be such a good judge of character if she was fooled by Darcy and becomes exterior mask? This is the climax of the novel because the critic's attitude shifts come here. And next is falling action. Darcy proves himself to falling action by finding Lydia and Wayne, forcing them to marry and giving them financial support all without credit. Elizabeth returns. Next is characters and characteristics. Number one is Elizabeth Bennet, the protagonist, main character, round and dynamic. The second daughter of Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth is the most intelligent and the sensible of the five Bennet sisters. She is well-read and quick-witted, with a tongue that occasionally proves too sharp for her own good. Her realization of Darcy's essential goodness eventually trumps over her initial prejudice against him. And the second is Fitzwilliam Darcy, and is the protagonist. A wealthy gentleman, the master of Pemberley, and the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Though Darcy is intelligent and honest, his excess of pride causes him to look down on his social interiors. Over the course of the novel, he tempers his class consciousness and learns to admire and love Elizabeth for her strong character. Jane Bennet is protagonist, support character, flight, and statistic. And the Charles Bingley is protagonist, support character, flight, and statistic. Mr. Darcy is arrogant, main character, round, and dynamic. And then Mr. Bennet is protagonist, super character, flight, and statistics. And then Mrs. Bennet, foolish, journalist, super character, flight, and statistics. DJ Bennet is a protagonist. Miss Bingley is antagonist. Mr. and Mrs. Garner is protagonist. Charlotte Lucas is protagonist. Georgina Darcy is protagonist. Mary Bennet is protagonist. Catherine Bennet is protagonist. Mr. Colin is arrogant, idiot, and George Wickham is antagonist. And Lady de Bourgh is antagonist and arrogant. Okay, we will talk about literary approach. Then I choose is structuralism approach. The surface structure and the deep structure of this novel are revealed in the analysis. Firstly, in the surface structure, the relationship among five main marriages are demonstrated clearly. Darcy and Elizabeth are the main roles in the novel, and their emotional development goes through the whole novel. And other couples are assistant in their emotional development. In this study, we can see why the author designed these five couples. Each couple play their distinctive role in the novel. And with the time going on, each couple and each character may change their place to play different roles. Okay, maybe until here my video to fulfill the final achievement for the English prose, for the final test English prose. I'm sorry if I have wrong. I hope to you are pardon me. And the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.